Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatoria. As you guys know this Warhammer very well by now, it's our old friend. I use it a lot for various discussions on short pole weapons. But one question that's come up quite a bit is about octagonal, square, rectangular and round and oval shafts on pole weapons. On historical pole weapons, what we tend to find is that with shafted or pole weapons that require you to use a plane of force, in other words to hit with one of the sides, and specifically with one of the sides, rather than like with the mace where I can hit with any side and it doesn't matter, you tend to get shafts on these weapons that are designed to increase your ability to index that face of the weapon, to be able to quickly feel in your hand that yes, my point or my edge is pointing towards the target and I'm going to hit it directly, and I'm going to cut or I'm going to pierce. Very clearly, if you don't hit square on, if you imagine this point hits like that, then the moment it hits a resistive point it's going to twist and all that energy is lost and it's not going to pierce through the mail or the head or whatever else I'm aiming at to pierce with that point or edge. Okay, and the same even goes for a hammer face there, because even with that, if I hit at a skewed angle, as soon as I hit, it's either going to glance off this direction or it's going to twist the whole weapon and just hit flat. So it will hit with a larger surface area and disperse the force that way. So clearly it's important whether you're using a pole, a hammer, a war hammer, or whether you're using an axe obviously, or a halberd, or a poleaxe, or a glaive, or a gisarm, or a fauchard, or a partisan, or any of these weapons that are able to cut. It's very important that your hands are able to feel which direction the edge is pointing in, or the point, or the axe blade, or the hammer is pointing in. Okay. Now, thrusting pole weapons like spears and pikes tend to have round poles. Okay. With those, it's generally speaking not important which direction the edge is pointing in. There are some exceptions to this, and there are some weapons where the edge is used and yet they usually have a round pole. However, these are types of spear. Some partisans I've seen do in fact have a round pole on them. I can't really say why. Maybe you have to bear in mind, even in museums, even in museum collections, the poles often are not original to the heads because the poles perished or were shortened or became very warped and unsightly, and so they replaced them with poles with new shafts in the 19th century to make them look more presentable, or indeed impressive. So it could be in some cases that whilst the socket is round, the actual pole itself was octagonal or whatever. But it does seem that there are, certainly in the earlier medieval period, where you do get certain types of large sort of boar spear and these sort of winged spears that you get in the late sort of Viking era and into the early, you know, into the sort of 11th, 12th century. You get these spears with quite long, basically a partisan-like blade with winged projections at the bottom, and in fact you do find these earlier. You find these in the Frankish period as well, back into the 8th century, and probably these were used for cutting. We don't have a lot of source material for that period. There is some mention of hewing spears, so-called hewing spears, in the Icelandic sagas, which sometimes gets translated as halberds, I believe, but that's a wrong translation. But they do have round shafts because they don't seem to have necessarily thought about doing octagonal polearm shafts that early on. But generally speaking, taking it back round to the beginning, generally speaking, a weapon that is designed to strike with a point or a hammer or an axe or an edge has a pole that you can tell the direction from. If you're only going to thrust with it like it's a pike, then clearly you can just stick a round pole on it. Okay, there we go. Thanks.